I'm Jaafar Jackson, and I'm here to talk about how I prepared for the role of Michael Jackson. Tour footage from my uncles, particularly Michael with the Bad Tour and Dangerous Tour, that really...
For years, nobody thought Michael Jackson could ever be recreated. But the moment Jaafar Jackson stepped on screen, even his own family thought they were watching Michael Jackson perform again. Cast as his uncle in the biopic Michael, the son of Jermaine Jackson delivered a performance that left insiders stunned, with some saying it felt like witnessing the King of Pop all over again. But not everyone agreed, and tensions within the Jackson family quickly surfaced. So what did Jaafar do that left them speechless? And why did his performance divide those who knew him best? Join us as we uncover how Jaafar Jackson's portrayal sparked reactions no one expected. The moment everything changed. The private screening room went dark as the members of the Jackson family settled into their seats with a lot of expectations. They had seen countless Michael Jackson impersonators over the years, tribute artists who could nail the moonwalk, dancers who studied every move from the Thriller video, and even singers who could hit the high notes. But this was different. This was family. This was Jaafar Jackson, Jermaine's son, attempting to embody his uncle Michael in a major Hollywood biopic directed by Antoine Fuqua. The stakes were impossibly high, and everyone in that screening room knew it. Then the film started, and within minutes, something extraordinary happened that nobody was prepared for. Jermaine Jackson, the man who had performed alongside Michael for decades, who knew every gesture and vocal quirk his brother possessed, started crying. There were real, uncontrollable emotions that came from somewhere deep. Later, still processing what he had witnessed, Jermaine explained that Jaafar became Michael on that screen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His son had become his brother in a way that brought genuine tears to his eyes. Other family members sitting nearby had the same reaction. They weren't watching Jaafar anymore. For brief, overwhelming moments, they were watching their brother, their uncle, their family member, who had been gone since 2009. The resemblance wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something in the energy and presence that Jaafar managed to capture. The family started crying because they genuinely felt like they were looking at their brother again. That's how convincing Jaafar's performance was. They couldn't believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't the reaction of people being polite about a family member's acting debut. This was genuine shock from people who knew Michael Jackson better than anyone else alive. And it revealed something important. Jaafar hadn't just learned to imitate his uncle. He had somehow found a way to channel the essence of who Michael was. But how did a young man with no professional acting experience pull off what seemed impossible? And what price did he pay to get there? The preparation nobody saw. Jaafar Jackson didn't wake up one morning and decide to play Michael Jackson in a movie. The journey started years before cameras ever rolled, and it began with a terrifying realization. He had never acted before in his life. When the opportunity first came up, Jaafar was conflicted. He knew what playing Michael would mean, the expectations from fans worldwide, the scrutiny from critics, and the weight of family legacy sitting on his shoulders. He had zero acting training to help him carry that weight, which made him genuinely conflicted about whether he could pull it off or not. Most people in that position would have walked away. The risk of failure was too high and the potential embarrassment too public. But Jaafar made a different choice. He decided that if he was going to do this, he was going to do it right, even if that meant starting from absolute zero. He hired an acting coach and spent a full year just learning the fundamentals of acting, not learning to be Michael or studying dance moves and vocal techniques. He started with learning what acting actually is, how to inhabit a character, and make believable choices on camera. Only after that foundation was built did he begin the real work of becoming Michael Jackson. Jaafar collected massive amounts of archival footage from YouTube and other sources, not just the famous performances that everyone has seen, but obscure clips, backstage moments, casual conversations where Michael didn't know cameras were rolling, and even rehearsal footage where Michael was working through choreography rather than performing the finished version. He studied everything obsessively. The way Michael moved between dance moves, the specific angle of his head during certain vocal phrases, the subtle hand gestures he used when talking, the energy he brought to a room even when he wasn't performing. Jaafar built a mental library of Michael's physicality, mannerisms, and energy so complete that he could draw on it instinctively rather than having to consciously think about every choice. He used all of that to really immerse himself and dissect everything, then allowed it to channel through him. Then came the physical preparation. Michael Jackson was one of the greatest dancers in music history, and his routines were punishingly difficult even for professional dancers at peak physical condition. Jaafar had to match that level while also acting, singing, and hitting emotional moments on camera. The production recreated the entire Beat It music video on the actual Los Angeles street where it was originally filmed in 1983. For 2 full nights, from sunset to sunrise, Jaafar danced on cement in freezing temperatures while cameras rolled. They were there all through the night shooting, dancing all night long on cement, which turned out to be quite hard on the body. His feet went numb from the cold and the constant impact. At a point, they started bleeding from the punishment of dancing for hours on unforgiving surfaces. But he kept going because that's what Michael would have done. The original video required that same level of physical commitment, and Jaafar understood that half measures wouldn't capture what made Michael's performances legendary. There were so many times during filming that Jaafar couldn't really believe he was recreating one of the most iconic music videos of all time. Being in that actual space where Michael had performed, he had to keep telling himself that he was really there, that this was actually happening. The shoot for Smooth Criminal brought similar challenges. That sequence includes Michael's famous gravity-defying lean, a move that looks like magic on screen, but requires special shoes, perfect core strength, and absolute precision to execute safely. Jaafar had loved that video as a kid, not understanding how the lean worked. He genuinely thought Michael had superpowers when he first saw it performed. Learning the technical reality didn't diminish the magic for him. It deepened his appreciation for Michael's commitment to creating moments that seemed impossible. All of this preparation happened largely out of public view. Fans knew Jaafar had been cast. They saw occasional behind-the-scenes photos, but they had no idea how completely he had dedicated himself to the role for years before filming began. And there were times he felt he was not doing it right, but the support system he had was a constant figure that never let him feel alone. The father who stood behind him. Throughout this entire journey, one person remained Jaafar's strongest supporter: his father, Jermaine Jackson. Jermaine wasn't just being a proud dad posting supportive comments on social media. He was actively involved in helping Jaafar prepare for the role in ways only someone who actually knew Michael could provide. Jermaine lived the story the film was telling. He was there for the Jackson 5's rise to fame. He performed on the same stages as Michael during the years when the group was the biggest act in music. He watched his younger brother transform from a talented kid into a global superstar. He knew Michael's mannerisms, his sense of humor, his work ethic, and his approach to performance in ways no amount of research could replicate. That knowledge became invaluable to Jaafar's preparation. When Jaafar had questions about how Michael would have approached a particular scene, Jermaine could provide answers based on actual memory rather than speculation. When Jaafar needed to understand Michael's mindset during specific periods of his career, Jermaine could explain what was happening behind the scenes during those times. But Jermaine's support went deeper than just providing information. He encouraged Jaafar when the pressure felt overwhelming. He reminded him why this story mattered and why it was worth telling honestly. He gave Jaafar permission to make the role his own, rather than attempting a perfect imitation that would feel lifeless on screen. Jermaine later expressed that he wouldn't want it any other way regarding Jaafar's casting. His son had made the entire family so proud with what he accomplished. Jaafar also acknowledged that the support he received from his family, from his father, and from everyone around him had been heartwarming. He honestly wouldn't have been able to pull off the performance without that support system behind him. But that support would soon be tested in ways neither Jermaine nor Jaafar expected, because not everyone in the Jackson family was going to react to the film the way Jermaine did. The screening that divided a family. The same private screening that brought Jermaine to tears created a very different reaction from other family members, particularly Janet Jackson. Reports indicate that tensions rose quickly when the film ended and people started discussing what they had just watched. Janet reportedly had serious concerns about how Michael's story was being told in the film. She questioned certain creative choices, worried about how specific periods of Michael's life were portrayed, and expressed frustration about aspects of the production that she felt didn't properly honor her brother's memory. Jermaine found himself in an impossible position. On one side was his sister, someone he loved and respected. raising legitimate concerns about how their brother was being portrayed. On the other side was his son, who had given years of his life to this project.
Between Janet and her brother, Jermaine, Jaafar's dad, Janet had something negative to say about almost every scene.
And delivered a performance that Jermaine believed was extraordinary. He chose to stand his ground and defended the film. That choice created tension that went beyond just a disagreement about a movie. It touched on old family dynamics, questions about who has the right to tell Michael's story, and fundamental differences in how different family members remember and honor Michael's legacy. For Jermaine, this wasn't just about being right in an argument, it was about protecting his son. Jaafar had put everything into this role and trained for years. He had pushed his body to the limit. He had opened himself up to global scrutiny by stepping into a role that many people thought was impossible to fill. Jermaine wasn't going to let that effort be dismissed or torn down, even by family members he loved. The disagreement revealed something important about the Jackson family that fans rarely see. They love each other deeply, but they don't always agree about how to honor Michael's memory. Those disagreements are real and sometimes painful, but they come from a place of caring about getting it right, rather than from indifference. Janet's concerns came from wanting to protect Michael's story. Jermaine's defense came from wanting to protect his son and believing the film honored Michael appropriately. Both positions came from love, even though they were incompatible at that moment. Interestingly, not everyone reacted to the screening the same way Janet did. Let's check out other reactions from the family members. What the family who knew Michael best actually said. Beyond the tensions and disagreements, there was a remarkable consistency in how family members who knew Michael intimately reacted to Jaafar's performance itself. Even those who had concerns about other aspects of the film acknowledged that Jaafar had accomplished something extraordinary. Multiple family members used almost identical language to describe their reaction. They said they felt like they were watching Michael again, not watching someone pretending to be Michael. Jaafar described his grandmother, Jaafar Jackson's reaction after watching the film. She told him how excellent he was and how much he embodied Michael. There were moments where she couldn't tell if it was Jaafar or Michael on screen. For Jaafar, hearing that from her was all he needed to hear. Jaafar Jackson's opinion carried special weight for obvious reasons. She had raised Michael. She had been there from his earliest performances as a child. She knew him in ways nobody else did. If she couldn't distinguish between Michael and Jaafar during certain moments, that validated Jaafar's work more powerfully than any critic's review possibly could. The family members drew an important distinction between Jaafar and the countless Michael Jackson impersonators who perform around the world. Those performers imitate Michael's moves, his sounds, his visual presentation. Some of them do it extremely well. But imitation isn't the same as embodiment. Impersonators copy the external elements of Michael's performances. Jaafar found a way to capture something internal, the energy, the spirit, the specific presence that made Michael himself, rather than just another talented performer executing Michael's choreography. Jermaine explained that there are a lot of people out there who imitate his brother Michael, and many of them are fantastic at what they do. But the difference between those impersonators and Jaafar is that they imitate Michael while Jaafar actually became Michael. People on set gave credit to Jaafar's work ethic, his attention to detail, and his dedication. Everyone recognized that it takes a specific kind of person to pull off what he accomplished. The film's director, Antoine Fuqua, made the decision to cast Jaafar specifically because of that DNA connection, but also because he saw something in Jaafar that suggested he could handle the impossible pressure of the role. Fuqua knew the film would be judged primarily on whether Jaafar's performance felt authentic, and he bet everything on a young man with no acting experience because he believed Jaafar had what was needed. That belief turned out to be correct, at least according to the family members whose opinions matter most. Now let's talk about Janet Jackson's questions and what effect the movie would have on both Jaafar and Michael Jackson's legacy. The deeper truth about legacy and pressure. What often gets lost in discussions about the biopic is the enormous psychological weight Jaafar carried throughout this process. Playing Michael Jackson isn't like playing any other historical figure. Michael is one of the most famous people who has ever lived. His performances have been analyzed frame by millions of people. Taking on that role means knowing that every choice you make will be compared to the original and found wanting by at least some portion of the audience. It means accepting that no matter how well you do, Some people will say you failed because the task was impossible from the start. Jaafar had to find a way to carry that weight without being crushed by it. And he did it by focusing on something specific, making Michael proud rather than making everyone else happy. He acknowledged that it's definitely a responsibility going into something this big in scope. There were so many moments he wanted to nail and make sure he captured the true essence and feeling. He had to feel it himself to make sure he believed in it first, before expecting anyone else to believe it. The pressure was particularly intense because Jaafar was attempting this while being part of the Jackson family. If he had been an outside actor with no personal connection, failure would have been embarrassing but survivable. As a Jackson, as Michael's nephew, failure would have felt like betraying family legacy on a global stage. Jaafar faced those same moments while playing one of the most demanding roles in cinema history, and having his father's absolute belief gave him the strength to push through. However, since he knew the kind of pressure he would be under and the scrutiny he would face from the world, why did he still choose to go through it, knowing that the outcome may vary? The inspiration that started it all. Jaafar's connection to Michael and to the idea of performance itself started long before anyone considered him for the biopic. It started at a Jackson 5 anniversary concert in New York, when Jaafar was young enough that the experience felt magical rather than analytical. That concert was the only time Jaafar got to see his uncle Michael perform live. Just seeing the fans' reactions and witnessing that energy really inspired him to want to pursue music himself. Interestingly, at that point in his life, Jaafar wasn't focused on entertainment at all. He was serious about golf, training regularly and considering whether that might be his future. But watching Michael perform and seeing how the audience responded planted something in him that eventually grew into a different path. The moment that truly captured his imagination came from watching the Smooth Criminal video as a child. The choreography, the storytelling, the iconic lean that seemed to defy physics. It all felt like witnessing actual magic. That childhood sense of wonder never fully disappeared. When the opportunity came years later to actually recreate that Smooth Criminal performance for the biopic, Jaafar carried that childhood inspiration with him. He wasn't just executing choreography. He was honoring the moment that first made him believe performance could be transformative. One aspect of Jaafar's casting that can't be ignored is the simple biological reality that he shares DNA with Michael Jackson. People on set and family members repeatedly pointed to this DNA connection as something that gave Jaafar an advantage no other actor could have possessed. Crew members commented on how Jaafar had it in him genetically. They wanted him to understand what he was going up against, because Michael's shoes are an incredibly tough set of shoes to fill. But at the same time, they recognized that Jaafar had something nobody else could bring to the role. This genetic connection shows up in subtle ways that are hard to fake through acting technique alone. The tilt of the head at certain moments, the way hands move when expressing emotion, the rhythm and timing of physical movements. These aren't things Jaafar had to consciously learn. They were already there, waiting to be activated through the intensive preparation he underwent. But DNA alone wouldn't have been enough. Plenty of people are related to famous performers without being able to embody them convincingly on screen. What made Jaafar's performance work was the combination of that genetic foundation, plus years of dedicated study, plus natural talent, plus the specific support system his father provided. All those elements had to align, and when they did, the performance achieved something rare. It felt exactly like the kind of moment Michael Jackson himself would have been proud of. Why Michael would actually be proud. There are specific reasons to believe Michael Jackson would be proud of what Jaafar accomplished based on what the world knows about Michael's values and priorities. First, Michael cared deeply about excellence and preparation. He was famous for rehearsing endlessly, for demanding perfection from himself and everyone around him, and for refusing to accept anything less than the absolute best he could deliver. Jaafar's years of preparation, his willingness to train until his feet bled, his obsessive study of Michael's work, all of that reflects the same commitment to excellence that Michael embodied throughout his career. Second, Michael valued authenticity over imitation. He didn't want people copying him superficially. He wanted performers to find the truth in the music and the movement, to connect emotionally rather than just hitting technical marks. Jaafar's approach focused on feeling the essence of each moment, rather than just replicating Michael's movements mechanically. That's exactly what Michael would have wanted. The next is that Michael cared about family and legacy. He was protective of his children and wanted them to have opportunities to develop their own talents without being crushed by his shadow. Seeing his nephew take on this enormous challenge and succeed through hard work and dedication would have meant something to Michael because it represents the family legacy continuing in a genuine way. Finally, Michael understood pressure and isolation in ways most people never will. He lived his entire life in the spotlight, dealing with impossible expectations and constant scrutiny. He would have recognized what Jaafar was experiencing and would have respected the courage it took to accept the role, knowing the criticism that would inevitably come. The family members who knew Michael best believe he would be proud. Jermaine said it directly. Jaafar Jackson expressed it through her emotional reaction to the film. Other family members, even those who had concerns about other aspects of the production, acknowledged that Jaafar's performance honored Michael appropriately. That consensus from people who actually knew Michael carries more weight than any outside opinion about what Michael would have thought. Now that you know the full story of what Jaafar accomplished and how the Jackson family reacted, does it change how you see the biopic and the conversations around Michael's legacy? Was Jaafar's performance really good enough to justify Jermaine's unwavering defense? And what does this reveal about how families navigate legacy when the person being honored is gone? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.